Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Sidelines. My name is Matthew Liam Bruni,
And I'm Benedict Rhodes.
and we hope that everybody continues to stay safe. And Ben, have you been up to anything lately? Anything interesting?
No, not really, to be honest. Same as usual. Not really a lot going on at the moment. What about yourself?
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's just been the same old for the past months, 2 months, I should
Past, I
say.
think on day 75 right now, or 73 or something. It's
Yeah,
pretty much been the same for those 10 weeks.
we're definitely getting up there. Yeah.
um, yeah, so we have a lot to talk about, of course, again today. First sort of topic we've got is the Major League Soccer, how they've apparently come closer to a possible return, and they've mentioned a possible tournament proposal, which will be held in Disney World down in Orlando, Florida. Um, the proposal is having all 26 teams down there with four groups of 6 to 8 teams, with knockout rounds and a championship after a short round robin sort of style tournament. It's unclear what trophy they'll get at the moment, but it won't be the MLS Cup. We know that. MLS does want to do some kind of regular season and MLS Cup after this tournament. This is sort of just like a bridge tournament. So Matthew, what do you think of this sort of idea we've heard over the last couple of days?
I mean, to be honest, I don't like it personally. I think that when you're using playoff finalists from 2019, first of all, I think that might seem a little I mean, not suspicious, but like I don't think that would be the right thing to do. I mean, of course, I know we know that the MLS season was suspended after every team played 2 games, so I don't think there would be a point in like counting those 2 games at this point. Um, I think in regards to the tournament style, I think it would work. Uh, of course, you would have to consider like how many fields, like how they would work it out. Like, are there going to be games being played at the same time, or like how the how it's going to be formatted? Maybe they can do something like I said, like a tournament style, but like maybe something other than using like playoff finalists from 2019. I don't think that would be the right decision for them. What about you?
Well, you mentioned them going to be using the 2019 playoff finalists, which semifinalists, which are Toronto, Atlanta, Seattle, and LAFC, who are the four semifinalists, and they would apparently be, or they should be in theory, the top four. So the four number one seeds in these four groups, two Western groups and two Eastern groups. But apparently, for some reason, they want to accommodate Orlando City because they're even though they're the host team. I don't see why they need to be accommodated, but apparently, to accommodate them, a random draw between Atlanta and Toronto would put one of those teams as the second seed in Orlando's group. So I obviously am not a fan of that. What do you think of that? Sort of a decision to have like a random draw to pick, despite the fact that Toronto FC beat Atlanta and got to the MLS Cup final.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's definitely not right, and like I said, in my opinion too. But I was going to mention like there are 24 teams currently in the
26.
26, sorry, in the MLS right now. So I think maybe if you can divide it into like groups of like four or like
And there are these
some,
three groups of six and one group of eight, I think.
yeah, like I mean, because it would be kind of, I mean, might be impossible for them to divide themselves like for 24 teams. Um, I think that yeah, I don't think it's right. Like I mentioned, I don't think having a random draw would be the best, especially for accommodating Orlando. I mean, not really a winning franchise in the MLS, if we can be honest. Just because it would be in their city doesn't mean they should get the royalties of like this the
Number one seed.
accommodations. Yeah, exactly.
Especially because, like I said, Toronto FC beat Atlanta last year to get into MLS Cup final. So I'm
Yeah,
not sure why they're doing a random draw between the two when if you're using 2019 sort of statistics and sort of records, Toronto FC were better than Atlanta because Toronto FC beat them to get to the final. So I think if you are going to make Orlando a number one seed, make Toronto the other number one seed and put Atlanta in one of the other two groups, maybe Orlando's group to sort of spread out the four semifinalists. But I really don't understand why they're accommodating Orlando in all this.
Well, I mean, if they were to do it, like if they did like an East and West style, I mean, they could do like Toronto and Seattle as like the one seeds, because I mean, as we said, Orlando doesn't really make sense for them to do in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see what happens in the upcoming weeks. I think they mentioned that they want to try and return in June, if I'm not wrong, like maybe
For this
mid to
tournament.
for the tournament.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
mid to late June, I think.
Yeah, I know. Something that came out, I think either this morning or last night, was that the Athletic was, of course, was reporting that MLS has reportedly sent out a letter to all the teams saying, "Do not leak stuff to different teams, or don't leak stuff from the teams to the media." And I think they mentioned the Athletic by name as well. They do not leak stuff to the Athletic because we don't want people to find out our plan. And then, of course, someone immediately leaked that to the Athletic, and the Athletic reported that this morning, I think. So that's probably the most athletic thing I've ever heard. But reporting on someone telling them not to give them information. But yeah, no, MLS I think needs to sort of really think about this and make sure they get it right. I think they're doing this for TV money, probably like ESPN or whatever. Basically owns MLS at this point. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, I'm not sure how effective this tournament is going to be if it's not really anything to play for. It's going to be just a TV product essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely like something we can't guarantee is that they can't play 34 or 32 now at this point, because usually they play 34 games in a season. They've already all played 2 games, but I think they definitely can't play like more than more than 30 games.
Yeah.
That definitely wouldn't be accommodating everybody.
I think part of the proposal though was to have the 4 groups having 2 East groups and 2 West groups, then having the round robin games of that tournament count towards the playoff or count towards the regular season. So every team will have played 7 games, like the 2 they've already played plus 5 round robin games. But then the knockout games in the championship game would just sort of just be part of that tournament. So that's another way of doing it. But again, I don't think they're going to get 34 games out of the season.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, we'll have to see in the upcoming weeks what MLS comes out with. But speaking of Orlando's, we've just been talking about the MLS tournament possibly playing in Orlando. Another league is also looking to return in that city. Of course, the NBA. Talks of playing in Orlando, of course, are heating up. Just this past weekend, they've been considering playing at the ESPN Wide World of Sports facility, which is located in Orlando. In the facility includes multiple venues for practicing games, and there's also around 24,000 hotel rooms for players, coaches, staff, etc., which I would assume be enough to accommodate everybody. And there's also still talks about how they want to return, if they want to continue in the regular season or if they want to go straight into the playoffs with how the standings are right now. And I also think I heard they were considering going like one versus 16, 2 versus 15, like in that sense. So Ben, what do you think about this idea from the NBA?
Yeah, so same thing with the MLS thing. I think we can't have every league playing in Orlando. I imagine NBA would have priority over MLS, of course. I do like the NBA's idea. Like you said, there's 24,000 hotel rooms in this facility, so that would be enough to accommodate the 2 leagues, and definitely the NBA, I think. So from an NBA point of view, I think they probably will go to Orlando. I think it's probably just sort of when rather than if. You mentioned the 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15 system. I do quite like that as well, although I would also prefer, I think, to see the original or sort of the regular way of doing the playoffs, like East versus West. Yeah, so I overall like the NBA idea. What about yourself? What do you sort of think of this plan?
Yeah, I do like the idea of them using Orlando, and especially like as I mentioned, like with all the venues that they have. I think I can't remember the exact number, but they definitely do have like multiple venues in the complex that they can use for multiple games at a time, so they don't have to worry about like using only one facility at a time, because of course that would be tough to cram everybody in like that.
That would not be
I
social
think
distancing.
exactly, yeah. I think I think in regards to the playoff, like how they want to return, I think they should definitely just go straight into the playoffs with the 1-16 seeding as 1-16, 2-15, etc. As I mentioned, I mean, of course, I've heard like other people like talking about what about the teams looking into the playoffs, like the 9, 10, 11 seed in each conference. But I looked at the Eastern Conference standings, and like I think the ninth seed was like 5.5 games away from the eighth seed, which
How many games
was,
remaining?
pardon?
How many games are remaining in the season?
I think it was around like 20ish. I'm pretty sure, but I think like even like some of the teams like are already out of the playoffs, like the bad teams, of course. And then I think at the Western Conference has a more tougher, like it's the tougher conference, of course, more tougher than the East. And there's a couple of teams looking in. I think the ninth seed was like 3.5 games away. Um, I think I think though that they should just go straight into the playoffs with that 1-16 seed. I mean, sorry for the teams that didn't make it in, but I think they should just go. Yeah, exactly. I think they should. I think they should just go right into the playoffs with that seeding, and just yeah, that would be the best option I think for them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way they're gonna have to do it because if there's 20 games remaining in the season, unless you want to have like 3 or 4 weeks where you're playing like pretty much every single day. I guess if there's no travel involved, so you probably could do that. Having let's say 20 games in 4 weeks or something, that would be possible. But do I think it makes sense to do that? No, because if you do that and a full postseason, then you're gonna probably getting kind of close to the start of next NBA season, or definitely cutting down the off season pretty dramatically. So unless you're going to delay the start of next season, I think they need to just go straight into the playoffs now and try to make it the schedule as normal as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I was just gonna say because as I mentioned the 1-16 seeding, since we're of course fans of the Raptors, they would have to if this was the case, if that was the playoff format, they would have to verse the Grizzlies in the first round. And then I think it would be the winner of the 8 and 9 seed, if I can remember correctly. And then apparently, if the Lakers would get that far, they apparently meet them in the third round, which would be the final four. So that I mean that would be pretty exciting for the NBA and of course for the Raptors. I mean just to see if they can beat the Lakers in the playoffs, like that would be exciting for us as Raptors fans.
I hope we don't have a rematch of LeBronto.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, that is something that would probably worry me. But I mean, who knows? We might be able to beat the Lakers, especially because we have already had this season.
Yeah, sort of like a potential matchup you'd have in the next league you want to talk about, which is the NHL. Um, the NHL, we mentioned last week that the league was considering a 24-team playoff format. And it was announced over the weekend that the NHL and the NHLPA have agreed to this format. Plan include teams for the top 4 teams from each conference playing each other to determine the seeding, while the other playoff series would be 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 7 versus 10, and 8 versus 9 in each conference. And Matthew, what do you think of this idea? I mean, we kind of mentioned it last week, but now that it's been announced that it's been agreed to, what do you sort of make of it?
I mean, yeah, I think I know a lot of people have not liked the 2014 format proposed by the NHL, but I mean, it's obviously better than nothing at this point because there's like it's different than the NBA because in the NBA there's a lot of teams that are out of the playoffs, but in the NHL there's definitely like a lot of teams that are looking into the wild card standings or division standings depending on who it is, like by like a point, two, or even like up to five or something. So it's definitely like close in that sense. Um, I think though, yeah, I think a 2014 format would work. I mean, also looking at some potential playoff matches would be one of them would actually be the Flames versus Jets in the first round, which would be an exciting series for Canadian hockey. And in total, if they use this format, there'd be a total 6 Canadian teams. So that means the Canadians would be one of the teams to get in, and also I think the Canucks. I'm not sure if they were out of the playoffs before the season was suspended, but they would be getting in also, and of course Toronto, Edmonton as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not sure if this was. I haven't actually done the math or really checked it out, but I saw a tweet from someone from Sportsnet saying that if the season ended the way it is now and they jump straight into the playoffs, I believe the Leafs will be playing the Boston Bruins in either the first round or the second round. I can't remember, but they would more than likely come up against the Bruins again.
I was going to mention. I think they would be versing Columbus because I think that would be the 8 and 9 seed. But I'm pretty sure, like depending on how they want to how they want to play off the top seeds in the Eastern Conference, it probably would have to be Boston depending on how they do. But yeah, I think also just to mention because there was also talks about if they want to have the first round like a best of 5 series or best of 7. Do you have any opinions on that?
Maybe do something similar like to what MLB does. Maybe having the first round be a best of 5, then the later rounds a best of 7. That might be the way to do it. I don't want to see the entire playoffs become a best of 5. Or maybe all the early rounds, but except for the Stanley Cup final of 7 games, maybe. But I would prefer to see the 7 games if possible. But if not, like I said, maybe something like the way MLB does it.
Yeah, I think like also as you mentioned, like I don't want a best of 5 series in each round. I think just having it in the first round would be good enough, and then they can move on in each round with best of 7 series, and then of course that would make them go back to 16 teams like a regular playoff format. So I think that having a best of 5 in the first round, rest is best of 7 would be the best option I think for the NHL.
Yeah, I think the way the format would work, I think, is like a bunch of teams would have buys into the second round, and then there'd be matchups to play those teams, kind of thing. So maybe almost like a wild card format, kind of for MLB. So maybe for those games, do those sort of wild card games, if you will, best of 5, and then everything from the second round onwards, best of 7 is probably the way I think to do it.
Yeah. And just one more thing before we move on. Do you think how do you think they should like format the top 4 seeds in each conference if they're going to do the 5, 12, 6, 11 format?
I don't know, that's a tough one. Maybe either maybe use the way that they're currently in the standings, or have them play against, they have against each other one time to just as like another wild card game, I guess. So decide who goes into which format, like maybe like a little mini tournament thing. But I think the best way is probably just to do it the way the standings are right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like we'll be finding out sooner than later what the
Yeah,
NHL wants to do. I also just wanted to mention that I think they put out a guideline for phase 2 of their opening
yeah,
up the
like
NHL.
team practices or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll see how they do in the next month or so. Um, Moving on, there's actually also another golf matchup for the second week in a row, a mini tournament, I should say. First last weekend, of course, it was the TaylorMade Relief uh, tournament, and now this past weekend it was the second match. Of course, it was Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. And as I mentioned, it was a two versus two golf match at the Medalist Golf Club in Florida, where Ben is actually right now.
yeah. As you can see behind me here, I'm currently down here in Florida.
So the tournament was a relief tournament for COVID-19, and after the day, they raised more than $20 million. And I also heard Woods and Peyton Manning were big favorites in this, and they won almost, or barely, I should say. Uh, and of course, we mentioned that this is only the second golf tournament in the past week, there's not been a lot of golf because PJ has been suspended. And when they returned June 11th, I mean, definitely looking at it yesterday, I think Tiger looked very healthy and ready to play. What did you think about it yesterday?
It looked like a lot of fun. I think I didn't watch a ton of it. I saw mostly highlights of it on Twitter and YouTube or whatever, and it looked like they had a lot of fun. They raised a lot of money, which is important, of course. They said Tiger Woods looked really good. He looked healthy for when PJ resumes, not too long from now. So he'll be pretty happy with the way he played, of course. And Peyton Manning and Tom Brady had a lot of fun, of course. They're two of the best in NFL history, and to see them coming up against two of the best golfers in history as well is a pretty cool little matchup. And I hope they do the match number 3 at some point too, with who knows who else. Maybe have 8 players or something, like 4 teams of 2 or something. I don't know. I would see that again sometime.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I didn't really get a chance to tune in for it, but I, like you, I saw highlights on social media and all the funny stuff posted. I think also, if I'm not wrong, I think Eli Manning, of course, Peyton Manning's brother, was roasting Brady on Twitter. If
And Tom Brady's pants ripped at one point, I think.
yeah, yeah, that too. But I think in the end, it was definitely a great tournament for a great relief or great cause, I should say. And of course, there was all the fun in it. Like, of course, you mentioned Tom Brady's pants being ripped, and and Tiger Woods looking healthy, and like as we mentioned, and yeah, it was just I think it was a great tournament for a great cause.
Yeah, they said $20 million so that's a lot of money when it comes down to it, and I'm sure they could, people who need it could use every penny they can get. And golf tournament's a little fun way to do it, and a bit of live sports as well. It's always nice to see.
Yeah, I think just quickly, I think you also mentioned having like possibly having a third match. I think I heard maybe Drew Brees was considering playing them.
Yeah,
So I mean that would be great to see another
yeah,
football legend.
get a fourth quarterback maybe, and then I don't know, Patrick Mahomes maybe or someone, and then like two retired semi-retired Tom Brady quarterbacks, and then two current quarterback or I guess current quarterbacks, and then
Yeah,
get a couple other golfers on there as well, maybe like Rory McIlroy or someone, and see what happens. And that'd be a lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. That'd be great to
And
see.
then eventually we're gonna have like the match 10, or it's gonna have like a 200-person field.
Yeah, I mean hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. Now moving on to another sport, which is actually has come back now, to some extent, is soccer. There's some leagues around the world. K League is still going. They just finished their third round of matches. But also the Bundesliga has been sort of at the forefront of everyone's attention this week, especially here in Canada. Canadian Alphonso Davies scored a goal and assisted another goal for Bayern Munich this weekend against Frankfurt. Um, and they have a big game coming up on Tuesday, Bayern Munich, against Borussia Dortmund, who are also red hot at the moment. Matthew, did you watch any Bundesliga this weekend?
I tuned into a couple of games. I tuned into Bayern and Frankfurt on Saturday. Of course, Bayern being Bayern, won 5-2 against
Yeah,
Frankfurt. I also tuned into Sunday's match. It was I think it was Dusseldorf and what was the other team? I think it was
Cole.
Cologne. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I was checking because they were down. Cologne was down. I think it was Cologne that was down 2-0,
yeah,
and they made like a miraculous comeback in like the final minutes of the game, which is great to see. I mean, I thought that was going to be the third blowout of the day because, of course, there was a 3-0 final and 5-0 final that same day. So I thought that would be the third blowout of the day. But I mean, no, Cole came back in the final minutes of the game, and yeah, that was exciting. What about you? What did you watch?
I watched the Dortmund game and I watched the Bayern game as well. They of course play each other this week on Tuesday, um, which is a match that could have a major impact on the title. Bayern currently lead by 4 points, so if they win, they have to be 7 points, which will probably sort of not seal their place at the top of the table, but it would definitely make them a lot more comfortable. But if Dortmund win, of course, it's down to 1 point. Both teams have won both their games since the restart convincingly. Dortmund look the best team in the world at the moment. Their forwards are incredible. Bayern had a bit of a shaky game against Frankfurt, but they're Bayern Munich, of course. They could beat any team in the world on their day, especially if Alphonso Davies is playing the way he's been playing. So it's definitely an exciting time for Bundesliga, and a lot of new fans who are now tuning into Bundesliga for the first time, of course.
Yeah, definitely. I think Tuesday will definitely. I feel like Tuesday's match, Bayern and Dortmund will definitely have a record watch,
Yeah.
like watching record, I should say, or viewing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, because there's not really much on at the moment, and then you have a match which would probably have a ton of viewers anyway, now having pretty much no competition, especially on a Tuesday. Like, there's going to be no competition, I don't think, for it. That's going to be a great game.
Yeah, definitely. Can't wait to see that tomorrow or
Yeah.
tomorrow on Tuesday.
Yeah. Another news around the soccer world: La Liga in Spain has announced that they can start as early as June 8th. They have some team workouts going in Spain. I'm not sure if they will return on June 8th. I'm not sure that's been announced yet, but that's the first day that which they can return, I think.
Yeah, it was the
And
first day.
Yeah, and then there's another league, of course, the big one, the English Premier League. They've started having some smaller team workouts again. You've seen a lot of players with some questionable hair coming out of quarantine. Some bad haircuts. They've also been testing all of their players and staff, the Premier League. And they've done, I think, as of this morning, like almost 1,000 tests, if not over 1,000 by now. We've already had at least 8 people test positive for COVID-19 between players and staff. I know one of them was a Bournemouth player, was one of the ones announced to be positive. Do you think, Matthew, that the Premier League should be returning when their players are still testing positive, and the United Kingdom, especially at the moment, is getting hit pretty hard? Or do you think it's best to lay off in that country for a little while longer?
I mean, I think it's very they have to be very cautious about all these positive tests coming back. I mean, I haven't like I know it's been a collective of tests. I haven't heard like how many from each team exactly. I think, like I mentioned, they definitely do have to be cautious in that sense. But I think if you get them to self isolate for 2 weeks and then maybe bring them back to training, depending on whenever the EPL comes back, like whenever they start doing whenever they start practicing would be, I think that would be fine to do. But I mean, of course, this virus can spread easily. I mean, if they're gathering with other people, I think that's definitely going to be very dangerous, I think. But I think that they can return in June. I mean, I also, like we were talking about Bundesliga and how their return has been so far. I think that the Premier League can probably follow in their path.
I think the Bundesliga and the K League in South Korea as well, they've done their sort of return pretty much perfectly. I think the other leagues definitely need to, like, not even just soccer, other leagues generally need to look at those two leagues, especially K League, I think, at how to not only get people playing again, but also how to sort of like run the match day operations. And the Bundesliga is making teams come from different sides of the stadium as opposed to do the same tunnel or whatever, and there's a lot of different sort of measures being put in place. So I think if possible, the Premier League to do that. Other protocol at the moment is testing every single person twice a week. And then if someone's tested positive, they need to isolate for 7 days, I think, even though the amount of days they're supposed to is 14. I think the Premier League is making it 7. So I think that's kind of stupid in my opinion. I think they need to do 14. I think safety should be more important than the actual soccer. But I think, yeah, when it's safe to do so, I imagine we'll see the Premier League back at some point in June, probably.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like we mentioned, that all we have, as I mentioned, I should say, like being cautious is very important with all these testings and
Yeah.
making sure people or making sure players, coaches, etc., are self-isolating in times when there's no games happening. I would assume that with Bundesliga, people are doing that, right? Of course, players and staff would be doing that for their own safety. So I think that they would have to definitely do that. And also maybe it'd be tough to bring in players from other outside the country. I don't know about the travel restrictions in England right now, but I think depending on that, it might be tough for them to bring back players, because I know the US, I think, just mentioned that they can bring in players from other countries in for sports reasons. I mean, I don't know about the EPL situation or England situation in regards to travel restrictions. But
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with them either at the moment, but a lot of the English Premier League players aren't from England or don't live in England, so that's definitely something that they need to be very careful with.
yeah, we'll have to see in the next month or so. We'll see.
Hopefully by episode 8 next week, we'll have an update for you.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay. So as we've been doing in the past weeks for Off the Sidelines, we've been mentioning our best team from the last decade in almost every every sport at this point. We've done MLB, NHL, NBA, NFL, and this week we're going to be doing our best CFL team of the decade, or the last decade, to win the Grey Cup. So I'll start with my pick. I mean, I felt like it would be too obvious for me to go with the Calgary Stampeders because they've been the most dominant franchise in the past decade. So just for a change, I decided to go with another great team, the 2015 Edmonton Eskimos. Um, of course, as I mentioned, I decided to go with a different team that's been dominant the whole decade. Um, the Edmonton Eskimos were 14-4 in the 2015 season, tied with their provincial rival, the Calgary Stampeders, for the same record in the West Division. When the playoffs came, the team played their, again, provincial rivals, the Stampeders, who they always seem to play at this point. They won. They won. They surprisingly won by a big score, 45-31, which punched their ticket to the 103rd Grey Cup. I think it was in Winnipeg, if I'm not wrong. In the game against the Ottawa Red Blacks, they found themselves down 13-0 in the first quarter, but they seemed to answer right back, being down only 13-10 when the first quarter came to an end. And for most of that game, the Eskimos found themselves down and trying to come back. When the fourth quarter came, they scored a 1-yard touchdown, which eventually won the Eskimos' 14th Grey Cup in their franchise history. And yeah, that's my team.
Yeah, I've gone. You mentioned the Calgary Stampeders. I think the 2014 Calgary Stampeders, the year before your 2015 Eskimos. In 2014, they had probably the greatest CFL team of all time. Definitely one of them, certainly, and definitely the best of the last decade, I think. You mentioned the Stampeders dynasty over the last decade. They won 2 Grey Cups and reached 3 other finals. And they've won at least 11 games every single year in the 2010s. And they went 15-3 in the 2014 regular season, which is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, tied for the best record of all time. And they crushed the provincial rival Edmonton Eskimos in the Western Conference Final in 2014, 43-18. So that was a pretty big win over their provincial rivals, and then took on the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the 102nd Grey Cup. Hamilton Tiger Cats, of course, haven't won a Grey Cup now since '99, I think. They haven't won this century, so this extended that losing run, and then led by longtime star quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell, the Stampeders won the 102nd Grey Cup 20-16 at BC Place for their 7th Grey Cup victory.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, the Stampeders were definitely the dominant team, and with quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell, they were definitely a dominant force. And a team that actually faced the Calgary Stampeders was the Toronto Argonauts in 2017 when they made that miraculous comeback in, I think it was in Ottawa, if I'm not wrong, and that crazy snowstorm.
I have the newspaper clipping hanging on my wall in my room. This is like greatest ever comeback or something, and like all the players like surrounded in snow.
Yeah, I think they actually scored a 100-yard touchdown, if I'm not wrong. I don't know if it was an interception or like an interception for touchdown.
They scored like a ridiculous touchdown.
Yeah, but that was definitely a crazy game. They were down 24-16 in the fourth quarter in the game, and making that crazy comeback against a team like the Calgary Stampeders is definitely one not to forget for the Argos.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely one of my best CFL memories. I haven't watched a ton of CFL over the last few years, but that's definitely one of them. Like I said, the Argos are our team for CFL, and that's definitely one of the highlights of my CFL time watching the CFL.
Yeah, same here. I mean, as like you, I usually tune into the Grey Cup or maybe even the playoffs, like East Final, West Final. But yeah, definitely, it was definitely a great game to watch.
Yeah, I think CFL is a bit underrated. I think people don't really see it, like some people see it as like Canada's league, but then some people see it as that league that's not the NFL. And I think that if that changes, people can sort of start seeing it as like our own domestic football league. I think it'll hopefully thrive and survive a bit longer. It's not doing well at the moment, but hopefully after this whole virus outbreak, people want to go to games and choose CFL as one of the ways that they can get their live sports fix.
Yeah, I definitely think like the Western Conference teams like have bigger fan bases in that regard. I mean, when you look at all the 5 teams from the West and their attendance, I should say, like they're definitely a lot of people gathered together to watch. But I think looking at the East Division, it's not really as big, or I should say maybe Hamilton might be another. Yeah, but like the Argos, maybe perhaps the Red Blacks and Alouettes. maybe not have the biggest fan bases, I should say, but
I imagine
mean,
that hopefully that'll change when people can start getting back into stadiums. They just want to go to anything, and hopefully, like the Argos, for example, they're in a city where the Argos might play on the same day as I don't know, the Jays, or depending on what part of the season it is, maybe the Leafs or something, or there's always gonna be, or the Wolfpack. There's always gonna be competition for them. Now, of course, York 9 as well. If people are into soccer, they can head up the road and watch a soccer game, and up in New York University. So I think the problem with the Argos is they're just in a city just filled with other sports. So hopefully some of these other teams can sort of lift up the attendance again. I know, like Saskatchewan Roughriders, for example, like that team is so well supported. It's ridiculous. Like they have probably the biggest fan base of maybe even any team in the country, almost, like in any sport, because like they sell out every game, and people like live and breathe the Roughriders over there.
Yeah, definitely. I think when CFL comes back hopefully in September, I think that's what they announced. Hopefully we'll get to see some games at least, just for some kind of entertainment. Did you want to add anything to your pick before we go?
No, I think I'm pretty happy with that. I know the TSN is showing some of these classic Grey Cup games at the moment every Friday, I think.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that kind of thing, tune into that. But other than that, I think I'm pretty good.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you guys for watching another episode of Off the Sidelines. My name's Matthew Liam Bruni.
I'm Benedict Rhodes.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.